Good afternoon. It is 3:30, and I'd like to call the June 11th, 2020 joint meeting between the Isle of Wight County Board of Supervisors and School Board to order.
I'd also like to call the Isle of Wight County Board of Supervisors meeting to order.
Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to our special call meeting, and we will begin with the Vice Chair, Julia Perkins, leading us in the pledge and a moment of silence.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay, the purpose of our meeting today is to continue discussion on future possibilities with Westside Elementary School, and we've discussed renovations versus a brand new school built possibly beside the Smithfield Middle School where current ball fields are located, and possibly relocating the ball fields across the road. So that has been our discussion in the past. Dr. Thornton, will you please open us up with some updates to our previous discussions?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll leave it up to the board. One thing I did put together was some information on prototype fee structures that are kind of related to what we're doing at Hardy and what we might do if Westside is new, and also some construction management at risk. If I could share that first, if that's of interest. Yes. So I just printed out the PowerPoint because of the way we are here. So currently we're negotiating with an architect, and we've been researching, put the research together, and we've talked about some of this. The benefits from a prototype, you're going to have to reduce fees because you're repeating an original design. You're going to have reduced time to get the drawings ready for bidding, and so that helps. And then some additional things, the design team has already had a chance to work through building construction. So they put their design together when it's brand new. They don't know what's going to happen when you actually construct the building. Now they kind of have an idea of what were those change orders, what were the things that went well and not so well during the process. Contractors that have built the prototypes. So our prototype actually that we're moving forward with has been built many times. So there's several contractors out there that have built it. If they happen to bid on it, they have confidence of what they have to do in building that school again, which sometimes brings, and they know what it costs to build that school, depending on the conditions and the market conditions. And your structural architect, your food service, your plumbing, mechanical, the electrical, all of those are usually reduced fees as well because they know what they had to do in that design before. Some of the items that remain unchanged are your civil design, and that is unique to each and every project, whether it's a prototype or not. So you're going to pay 100% of your civil design fees regardless. Your bidding and construction administration for all the disciplines remain the same because the level of effort during those phases are the same as a new design. Your surveys, your inspections, furniture design packages, they're typically the same as a new design. The next slide I put in there for you was kind of a breakdown to show you the percent of a typical design fee in that first column, and broke it down by the different phases. So if you see at the bottom of that first column, that's 100% of the cost. They're split up that way, through schematic design being 15%, your design development 20%, etc. And then the next column shows you in a prototype what they may be. So you see schematic design drops from 5 to 10% instead of 15% of the cost. Your design development drops in the range of 10 to 15% down from 20. and your construction documents drop dramatically to like 20% to 25%. And then your, excuse me, as we said on your previous slide, bidding and negotiation and construction administration, that doesn't change. So you're going to pay as if that was a new school. So you see, instead of 100% of the charges, you're in the range of 60 to 75% of what you're going to pay for all your fees. So the last slide is giving you a cost model. To put all that language into numbers, and I'm a math guy, we want to see numbers and what that means. So this is just a preliminary cost model for the Hardy Elementary design, and that's construction to build it, $27.4 million. That's an estimate, and I believe that was based on the report we got. I think it was 230 square foot, I believe it was. But again, all that's going to be contingent on market conditions when the project's bid. But I thought, at least let's use that number and see where we are. So on the left-hand side, I've tried to show a typical fee, and on the right-hand side, a prototype fee. And you see the breakdowns there. Your typical fee is 6.5% to 7% for typical, and a prototype 3 to 5. And if you look at that range for a $27.4 million project, you see there's a pretty significant difference between the fee range for your basic services. Then your next column, or your next row, talks about additional services, and that's 2 to 3%, and they're the same. And it says depending on what's desired and required. So those are the fees I talked about, your survey fees. There's some things that are required. The surveys are going to be required regardless. If we desire something additional, those fees may be in there. It may be you're looking at the asbestos abatement of the old building, tearing it down. So those are typically 2 to 3%, and either scenario, you're going to pay those fees. So then you see the new typical range versus a prototype. And then the last row talks about level of customization, 3 to 400,000. And I put on there, this is really just a guess. And what this is, these are any changes to the prototype. So right now, we've chosen Florence, Bowser, and Suffolk as our prototype. So the fees associated and the costs associated with that now are the mechanical system that exists in that building right now, the design of that building right now. So if we want to change the mechanical system, that could have an effect, up or down on the cost. We are going to change the face of that school. Right now it has a curved entrance, and we're going to make it more of a square entrance and make it more of ours, so it's Hardy. And now that fee, I've already talked to the architect, they're waiving any fee to do that. But there may be other changes, like we have more classrooms spaces than they may have. We may have more special ed spaces. So that any customization, anything we change from that prototype, that has to be a design cost. And that, like I said, that is just a best guess. But bottom line, I just wanted to show you the range. So you're really looking at the architectural fee being between about 1.7 million and 2.6 million is the range. And again, we're in negotiations for those percentages, so we're negotiating those now. Compared to your typical range, which would have been 2.7 million to 3.2 million dollars. So we do have some significant savings in going that route to the prototype. So I just wanted to show you real numbers. We all knew there would be some savings there, but what those really mean in dollars. Is there any questions with that before I move on?
I had one, Dr. Thornton, if I may, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned, and some of us went to the Florence Bowser site, which is a great, I'm happy to hear that that is the site or the selection. You had mentioned that the front of it, going from the curvature to the more squared, I'm glad to hear that they're not charging on the architectural side, but I believe that doing that, is that savings reflected in the, because it's a lot cheaper to do square than it is a rounded, so are those savings accounted for in the 27.4?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
So they base their cost when we went through the RFP process and their design, and we looked at all that. They've changed the design some to meet our needs. We had to send out like how many special ed classrooms we want. Anything that we wanted special, they accommodated and made those changes. So, and it's really driven by your square footage. Your price is going to be driven by how many square feet you have. And one good thing is, even though we had more classrooms per grade than they have, the square footage changed by like only 6,000 square foot. Or I think they reduced it by 6,000 square foot somehow. So that was good. And they were K through 5, we're K through 4, but we still had more classrooms because we're looking at just a little different configuration. And the other things that may change the cost too are your finishes, as far as they have terrazzo floors in the hallway. Those are more expensive up front. Maintenance, they're cheaper. All those decisions will drive the cost of that building. The mechanical system could drive the cost of the building. But we'll get advice throughout that process, and we want to make good decisions and have long-term a product that's going to last as well and low maintenance. So we'll be discussing all of that. Which just kind of lead to my second thing, and I know I've talked to some of you briefly about a construction manager, but a little different than what you have done previously when Georgie Tyler was built. When Georgie Tyler was built, the county hired a construction management company to oversee the construction. And we're not big enough to have that. Virginia Beach has their own person that's hired by the division. We don't have that capability, and so that was a wise thing to do. But if it's just a construction management, you're going to pay them the fee to oversee the project, report back to the board, make sure the architect is holding the construction company to everything, and it's a good process. But there's also a construction manager at risk. That's a little different. They have some skin in the game. And so that's what we have sent an RFP out on the street for, and we'll be getting back at the end of this month. And so I just wanted to share briefly what that is. And again, we've been researching that. So the experience is that the fees charged by a construction management firm at risk are almost always lower than the fees included by a general contractor in the bid situation. In addition, the CMAR oftentimes will bring significant savings to the owner through the design phase by offering alternative methods and materials to consider. So you hire them, they're working with the architect as you're designing, making those key decisions on mechanical system finishes. Also, because they've been involved, you're probably going to have less errors and omissions. You're probably going to have less change orders as the project goes down the road. And with all that said, their fees typically range from 3% on a large project, which is like $75 million or more, to 5 to 6% on smaller projects. And plus some additional fees, typically about 1% for pre-construction services. But the key to this is these fees are covered under the budget provided by the design firms in their presentations that typically you would be charged by the general contractor for. So you're just paying someone else to oversee the general contractor and hold them accountable. So, and then they bring the project in at a guaranteed maximum price. So we can have further discussion and talk about that. But as we go down this road, we do have to make some decisions soon as we negotiate with the architect. And then we don't have the funding we'll have to come to you to request to hire a construction management firm at risk. But all of this is happening, like I said, if we're going to stay on track for the opening that we talked about in August 2022, we're still in line with that. We're moving along. So that's kind of where we are, and is there questions with that at this point?
I have a question. When Florence Ballard School was built, do you know how many change orders they had to that school? And at the same time, were those change orders incorporated in the final print of that school?
You know, I don't know that with Georgie Tyler, but typically, I know from my prior experience working on projects, the first thing you try to do if you have a change order is to incorporate, okay, we got this change order, and the construction company or the construction management firm will say, well, if you give up this, we can be square. And so they try to do that first. But there's some things that could come up that a change order, it's going to cost you more money. And in this process, that's why it's good to have a construction management firm at risk.
But if we don't incorporate the change orders, then when we build another school, just like this prototype school, then we're going to encounter the same problem, and it's going to cost us more money rather than fix the problem in the very beginning.
Right, exactly. And so we got two things going for us. One, that it's a prototype, so they know some of the problems they've had before building this design. And then two, if you have the construction management firm up front with the architect, they're going to know those things up front. They basically become your general contractor up front, and then hold whoever you do hire to build the school accountable along the way.
Mr. Jefferson, if I may, when you refer to the drawings, are you talking about incorporated into the new set of drawings or as-built, and then the problems that were identified?
And I'm not in the construction business, but what I'm saying is, during the fabrication of that school, if they had problems, they come up with a change order. And I was asking the question, were those change orders incorporated in the blueprint of that school after the change order was approved?
Okay. Having been in construction for a number of years, that
Right.
generally we call that as-built, and it's what it includes. It shows what was changed. It will track where underground is laid and all those kind of things, and that's required at the end of the project.
So I just wanted to update you kind of where we are in the process of Hardy, and then I know we're here to discuss, because we've never come to a conclusion, where are we with West Side? And I know the last time we met, the numbers we got from the firm were, I don't know, they seemed very high. And now that we've gone through the RFP process and hired an architect, we're looking at $230 a square foot or $220 a square foot is some of the ranges we got for construction only. And they don't seem to match up with the advice we got last time. And so I don't know if that changes any of the discussion, but from, I guess from our perspective, we're looking at and living through the problems of the schools. West Side's has a lot more issues than Hardy, and I don't know if sinking a whole lot of money into this building to get 25, maybe 30 years of life out of it is worth it when you're looking at building a possibly new school that could get 50 or more years life out of it. And I think like Jackie said, we have, since our last meeting, we looked at the land across the street from Smithfield Middle School, that open field. Before there's a wooded area with a significant drop off. After that, we've walked that grounds with our architect, and he also walked the fields and that now are practice fields over at the high school. And he was able to take a 1,000 student middle school that they had already built and take that and put it on the site. and then put all of the parking around it. And I think I've sent a copy to Randy on that. And then the associated ball fields and putting some ball fields across the street. And so it fits. So bottom line, it fits, which helps with land. So the land you would have to acquire is for some ball fields. So that's kind of where we are.
I don't recall, do we have demolition prices? You remember what they are for this building as well as Hardy?
For I think I have them for. We have estimates of demolition, again, without knowing what's in there. The estimates are around $400,000.
Is that for both?
That's just Hardy.
Just Hardy?
That's just Hardy. And again, I guess that's part of the discussion too. I don't know if we would suggest demolishing this building. We have, like this space, we have refurbished and could be a great community space. The gym could be utilized for parks and recs. You never have enough gyms or recreational areas. The building behind us here, we're warehoused. Since I've been here, we've repaired the roof 3 times, and it was repaired several times before I came. So at some point, we probably need a better roof over our heads in the central office. So I think there's pieces of this building that could be used if the decision was to move down the road and build a new west side.
Well, I'll jump in if it's all right. So from the beginning of our conversation, I've kind of always stayed of the same opinion that putting a lot of resources and finances into this site may not be our best option, particularly when you think of longevity, when you think of how many years you get out of a facility and things like that. So I'm still in favor of constructing a new west side, but the question becomes, what does that price tag look like? You know, there's only so much you can do with so much as far as finance and things like that and afford through our citizens. So that's going to be the biggest determiner, I think, from my perspective on the cost. While I'm in favor of a new west side, the figures and the cost are going to have to be such that line up with what we're able to afford. And I don't know that we've seen any hard, I know you mentioned $220 to $230 per square foot. With what's the square footage potential for a middle school? What was, I didn't hear that number. I'm just trying to do some preliminary math in my mind of what that could look like.
So, I'm not sure what the square footage for that is because we haven't been putting that on the street, but based on your number of students, if this project was, like I said, $27.4 million for construction only, your middle school is probably going to cost more than this new Hardy, because you're looking at over 1,000 students. So, but again, with that said, we need to be looking at down where are we located. Are there some savings and some smart decisions we can make down the road? Like right now, if it's located right next to the existing middle school, and the middle school and high school become the new 8 through 12 high school, you have parking that doesn't have to be redone. You have paving that's there. You have an auditorium that sits there between the two. I will tell you, auditorium is a huge amount of square footage. It sits empty most of the time, and it's very expensive to heat and cool. Do we need to build a new auditorium in the middle school? So there's some potential savings down the road with having it over there as well. But you're looking at probably more than the cost of this. And again, this is an estimate, and I do think most architects that we deal with are on the conservative side, because they don't want to give you a low number and put out the bid and come in high, typically.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Jim, I'm going to drop back to your slides that you showed us. You have a thing called civil design. Can you explain how that differs for everyone here from the schematic and design and programming?
Well, from what I understand with the civil design, it has to do structurally with the building. And so even though it's a prototype, all the testing and all the designing that goes into that, they have to treat it as if it was brand new. And I could probably get you a better answer from a civil engineer, but that just preliminary discussions with them and putting this presentation together, that's kind of the answer, that a lot of it has to do with structurally. They can't skip tests. They have to go back and do everything over again.
Well, I had the opportunity of visiting Chesterfield. I know that those schools were not presented when you went out for your RFP. Okay? Chesterfield has built 7 middle schools, and I only went back 3 years. And they are bringing them in at anywhere between $190, with the most expensive being $221 per square foot. They have mastered a particular set of drawings, and by the way, every one of those schools is an MMRR or RMM, okay, design schools. And looking at all the drawings, including at the middle school that we visited just recently and that I had a chance to walk and talk with the builder, that particular architect is a modular architect. Every single one of his plans, whether it's a T-shaped or a V-shaped or a W-shaped or however it is, you can literally put the pieces together. And it includes their middle school. The administrative areas predominantly in these schools, and the variance, by the way, in those schools was whether or not they had a larger gym or a smaller gym. And that variance was covered by Parks and Recreation, because Parks and Recreation asked them to build a larger for them. Now, we're not going to ask for a larger gym, but the number that I'm seeing that is the variable on this is the site work. And the site work can vary anywhere from 2.5 million all the way up to several, up to about 5 million, depending upon the soil's condition and what has to be done there. So I think one of the things we need to do very quickly, particularly on the Hardy School, is get some soils testing. It's not the testing that the final contract will be based on, because they're going to have to do additional soils testing under the site where the building is built. But you got to know what's in the soils very quickly across the range of possibilities of where they're going to be placing the school. That's number one. I will tell you that the cost of $27 million for just a building, to me, is after seeing this, and I'm talking about schools that are currently under construction that aren't costing that kind of money. So it's, I can't go along with that number. I don't know how the modeler came up with it. Probably wanted to make sure that is, but that should not be the number that goes out on the street. The second thing is, I think it's very, very important. And by the way, I believe we budgeted, Mr. Keaton, wasn't it 22 million in our capital plan?
Yes, 22 million.
So we've got to get some sharp pencils on this project. I happen to agree with you. I think that the management group should be at risk as well and should be in the design phase of it, because they are going to take numbers rather than niceties. And for instance, a glass wall is 4.5 to 5 times more expensive than a wall put up with a window in it. And that, you don't need glass walls. That's going to run those costs up way too fast. Nice to have? Yes. Needed? No. And that's what we've got to really look at for our constituents. What is needed and how do we provide that? I still think we have some really good opportunities, and I think we need to discuss where the general consensus is on West Side, because in talking with the builder up there, I mentioned the fact that we're going to be building 2 schools, and having had a little experience in the building industry, he smiled and said, right, because he knows that you go out for an RFP on the second one as well, and so on and so forth. But there are huge savings, for instance, in the design. It's the same architect, and they're all modular. The middle school is the same. The auditorium on their middle school that they're building for $30 million, the auditorium is $1.5 million of that. And I think we budgeted for the middle school 28, did we not?
28, that's right.
So again, I think we really got to sharpen our pencils. And that was with terrazzo floors. So we have opportunity. But I think we really need to come to a consensus. We don't have to do it once we get down the road and we find out what the bids come in and so on and so forth, and look at alternatives after the fact. But what we can do is, if we don't go out in the right format at the beginning, you have 2 complete separate projects. And the way that Norfolk saved a lot of money recently is they went out with 5 elementary schools. I don't want to pay what Norfolk paid, okay? But on those, you had a choice of bidding 1, 3, 2, all 5. And it ended up, I believe, the winner of all the bids, brought in the lowest number, was the fellow, the construction company that built all 5 of those. So, and at a substantial savings over what had been done on an individual basis. So we need, if we're going to do the middle school and come back and right after, back to back here, then what we really need to do is we need to group these and let them be bid, but maybe the same architect, so that we can be in a stronger negotiating position with the architect and get his fees down.
I have a question, Mr. Grice. You're talking about Norfolk with the reduction with the 5. Do you know what their cost per square foot was?
I do not. I don't have it with me.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
I know the company that won it, but
could I interrupt just a moment? I'm having a very difficult time hearing.
okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'll try and do it a little closer. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, thank you.
But I don't have the Norfolk numbers, so I can't help you with it. They were more expensive than Chesterfield, I believe.
I would say, I would imagine even building 5 schools in Norfolk is more expensive than Chesterfield.
Right.
And we are more subject to the Norfolk building environment than we are the Chesterfield building environment.
Absolutely.
So there is some variance with prices in those areas. I am hopeful that I'm not hopeful there is a recession, but because there is a recession, there might be some savings for us in that with the interest rates being lower, there's savings for borrowing. With the job shortage, you would hope that there's an increase of people looking for jobs, and if we're supplying jobs, that people are more willing to work. So we might be able to get some savings on those aspects too.
Well, right now, the construction industry is looking for work.
Mm-hmm.
And the bids that are coming in are reflecting that,
Right.
all right? But I think that we need to look at West Side and say, for instance, from an purely architectural basis, if we're going to use the same architect, because you go up and look at a middle school that this architect has designed, and like I said, I just walked one the other day, then we should be able, in a stronger position, to negotiate on the design package, because they will be doing both schools.
I'm happy to do that, you know.
Well, there's some legal issues with doing that too. We've already sent out an RFP because the only thing we were approved to do is Hardy, and we've chosen an architect. And so what you'd be asking is to throw that out and send out a new RFP, and I'm not sure that's the type of business you want to be in after already going through an extensive process and awarding it to a firm.
Well, I would challenge our attorney to take a look at that particular process and see what we can do with, since we've already got an architect under contract, how we can roll that through. We've done that with engineers before. So I don't know all the legalities of it, but if it's going to save you $100,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, it's certainly worth looking at and looking at quickly. It would be an absolute shame not to do that and then turn around and say, oh, we want to build the West Side now, and choose the same architect.
You may choose the same architect, and again, I think from what we've seen, would be foolish not to choose a prototype, and you see the savings in that. So really, regardless of the architect, you're going to have those savings, and it may well be, like you said, RRMM has built many schools. They built our Georgie Tyler, and so I'm sure they have many, and you already know. I know for a fact too they have prototype middle schools, and like I said, you can already make adjustments on them. Do we really need an auditorium? So there's definitely savings out there.
And what also is interesting is the school that we walked recently was a takeoff of Georgie Tyler. Bigger, almost twice the size. Not quite twice, but bigger. But that's when they let it out for contractors, they were doing the bidding, they walked our school. I knew exactly where it was. So it's a real opportunity. And I think we need to look at that and be able to say, you know, we have a bid on we have a bid right now for the Hardy Architectural. I think we need to go back out and get another RFP on the street quickly, if this is the way we have to do it. What if you had 2 schools? Middle school and the elementary school. When it comes to the contractor's building on it, I like the risk management side because they can, in that process, identify previous contractors or construction groups that have built that school before. We have one here in Newport News area that has built several of the Chesterfield schools for that architect. And so consequently, I like the fact that not only is it the low bid, but it's also the experience and and being able to bring it on. They know what all the problems are. They've been through it so many times, particularly with that architect. And believe me, it's all cookie cutter.
Well, I don't know. I think I can speak for the board. You guys can speak up. We would be very pleased to put another RFP on the street for West Side and get that moving. And I think that will drive competition, whether it's, I'm sure RRMM would go through that process again. It'd be foolish not to. And I'm sure it would drive competition with the others who would want to win that job. So I'm just not sure, and like I said, I don't know with your attorney here. I just don't know about the process of eliminating the RFP we've already done and calling up RRMM and say, we're moving in a new direction, you got to rebid on 2 schools now. I'm just, like I said, I don't have the
Well, they have
expertise
choice.
and knowledge. So I just don't know the legal ramifications. I'm not an expert in that, so.
For the potential savings that are there, I believe it's worth looking at in the very near term.
And that was the reason why West Side was brought up to begin with, because it seemed like it was an awesome opportunity for some savings for both schools.
Well, and if I could interject, one of the reasons I think we're having the conversation, I understand no one wants to go after you've been through an RFP and then do the proverbial psych, to the company. But I think what we're all grappling with here is understanding, where the bids will come in, because I didn't do that. I'm not doing the crackling noise, just for the record. But we've got to understand the total cost, because then we have the bond market to deal with, looking at revenues and looking at all the costs. So looking at doing something from a piecemeal fashion, when I say piecemeal, meaning you do one now and then you think about another one, to understand the total cost is helpful from budgetary and revenue projection, because if we don't know what something's going to cost, there's no way that we can possibly plan for it. So I think that's one of the reasons we're talking like that today, because there's a lot of unknowns out there, and understanding the financial part of it. And I don't know if Mr. Jones had an answer for the RFP now, if it's something he wants to look into. Okay, thank you, sir. So, but again, I reiterate, I'm 100% in favor of moving forward with a new West Side, but we have to understand the numbers, both on the budgetary impact of revenues, of looking at, is there a tax increase that is warranted to be able to handle certain things, or if there's things that can be trimmed to be able to handle the cost. So those are things that we're trying to look at as well. So there's a lot of data going through our minds as we sit here. It's not discounting any processes, it's just we're trying to understand from the financial standpoint as well. That's all.
So I'm going to say, last time we met, we did talk about West Side and we talked about Hardy, and we were told by you guys, and I think I clarified overly to the point where you guys were joking on me. Did we want to go forward? You wanted us to go forward with Hardy and look up these things. If we put out a new RFP, if we do all this stuff all over again, this took us 6 months. We're going to push back all these projects 6 months. Now, that could change the whole pricing. The market could completely change in that time too, and we could end up spending more money because interest rates go up, or the jobs go back into place, so we're not getting the same bids we're getting before. So there's that factor too. So you may end up spending, you may get a better number, but ultimately it's not a better number. So, I mean, we just went through the process, we did the RFP, we awarded the contract, all with your blessing going forward. So I really wish this would have been the conversation 6 months ago.
Well, with all due respect, it could not be the conversation 6 months ago because there's a lot of things that's changed in the bond market over the last 6 months. So money right now on getting funding for doing schools, even the slightest change in the percentage rates do impact our ability to negotiate. And so there are things that took place in the bond market, even as recent as the last 30 days, that impact this whole discussion. So while, yes, we gave a nod on one end, there were unknowns that now we're facing, saying that as we look at the financial forecast, financially, if we can do things to position ourselves to do 2 schools now with the way the bond market is, it is in our best interest for the citizens completely. So yes, 6 months ago we were talking about it. There were a lot of unknowns that we are at today, including the condition our country's in. So the financial aspect, which is what we're concerned with, plays a big part. And so with the interest rates being lower, that does impact the discussion. And we ultimately are responsible for making sure that we manage the fiscal integrity of our county in such a way that we don't overburden our taxpayers.
And I understand that, but if it ends up, what if the bond market ends up going up from here and we didn't take advantage of that low rate and now we're getting a higher interest rate? So, I mean, your argument goes both ways on that aspect, that if we don't move now, we've lost that good interest rate and maybe it goes up. So now it goes from, let's just hypothetically say 2% to now it goes up to 4%. Well, you've just doubled your interest rate. So, I mean, like you said, you don't know what the market's going to do. You have a good number now. And so I'm worried about I pay taxes here too. I don't want my taxes to go up millions of dollars, but I also know what the needs of the county are, just like you do. And if we know that we have a good interest rate now, we have done the RFP, we've selected an architect, and we're moving forward, I'm reluctant to start the process again, and then 6 months down the road, now the interest rate is doubled, and now it's costing the county and the citizens even more money.
It's hard to what if. I mean, 6 months ago, we had no idea financially or otherwise what position we'd be in today. That's an example right there.
Well, I mean,
we're looking
yeah.
at something, the fact of the matter is we've identified Westside as going to be needed to be dealt with here very soon. The discussion was earlier, do you do something to make it last another 20, 30 years, or you do go ahead and replace it and have something good for 50 years? And then I remember in our original discussion, we talked about the educational experience of our students. We can't ignore the fact that you're going to have that same group at one point in time going to Hardy with one experience and going back to another school that was built in the other century and having another experience. So there's that plays in. There's also, of course, the other part is that, I've heard citizens say, don't be hasteful, don't hurry this through. One person said, are you just trying to hurry this through so you can get your name on a plaque on the wall? I know that's not the case. So back to what Mr. McCarty had said, the economic part of this, we had no idea the interest rates were going to go where they are today, which is why we're discussing and bringing up Westside, trying to seize the moment and be good, and I'm not saying that you're not, but taking the opportunity to be good stewards of the county taxpayers' money, at the same time making sure what y'all are interested in, make sure the educational experience is what it needs to be. So it's not a matter of trying to drag this out or making it longer. It's about trying to invest the proper amount of time for a sizable amount. This is a tax increase, any way you look at it, to the citizens of this county, and it's not going to be a one-time, one-year tax increase either. And the taxpayers need to know that we looked at all options. We don't need to go into 5-10 years from now and have to build a West Side or deal with the West Side. And I know that you know this, but I just thought it bared being brought up because it seemed to me that what I was hearing, maybe not rightfully so, was, okay, you're dragging this out, let's hurry up and get this thing done, I don't want to wait another 6 months. The what ifs are going to be the what ifs. The what ifs in this case has been better so far in our financial aspect. So that's why, in my opinion, I still want to know about the West Side part. I wanted to know about it from the very get-go. The point was, at that particular time, I think the discussion was, we only knew enough to go get the Hardy thing moving forward. Now I think we need to also make sure we look at the West Side. So I'll get off my soapbox.
I know, I'm happy to build 2 schools. You want 3 schools built, we'll build 3. I mean.
Well, I'm
you know.
only happy to build what we need. Just for the record, I only want to build what we need. It's not free money.
No, I
And I
understand
reiterate that, and I think that's your point too.
Yes,
We don't joke about this. This is going to cost some people some very dearly on their taxes, et cetera. So, but back to the point, I mean, that's why we're looking at this. And I think Mr. Grice, you can tell his experience on this. He does a lot of